hills and build them high. Makes a long time climbing before I die. I want the chance to spit in his eye. Well, they gave me bars, but I can see between to a dusty yard and a long gone green. They call that freedom, if you know what I mean. And I drown my sorrows, but the whiskey's gone. I'm sober as good.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Shortbangers. I'm Matty, joined tonight by Colin. As always, Colin, how are you doing?
Very good, mate. How are you?
Good. Roasting. It's like I think I'm sitting in the hottest room in Fife at the minute. Probably not, but it feels like it. Yeah. And we're also joined tonight by special guest Chris Brookmeier, author and St Mirren fan. Chris, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. Can't complain. Sun's shining here, sort of.
We'll ask you that question again after the next half hour and see how you're feeling then. Thanks very much for joining us, Chris. We're obviously in pre-season, which is a difficult time for a football podcast to fill, so it's great that we're able to kind of get some guests on, and especially some clever guests, which helps for an episode where we have a duty to answer people's questions. We sort of frame this series as QI for idiots.
Right.
I don't know if it's QI by idiots is probably a better way of doing it. So over the course of the next 25 minutes or so, we'll ask you some of our listener questions, and we'll ask you also a wee bit about sort of your own work as an author and some of the stuff that you've written and put out there. So I'll start off with a listener question just to kind of ease us in. And so it's from Ian T. He says, why do the Ouija's refer to a bottle of ginger?
Why do we refer to it as a bottle of ginger? I think it must derive from like ginger beer. You know, it became a kind of generic term for all soft drinks. It sort of gave rise to that great joke that kept getting recycled down the years about I think the first time I heard it was probably Derek Ferguson, and it became Barry Ferguson. It was about them being taken out for a posh meal by one of the new Italian players like Lorenzo Amoruso, and trying to seem sophisticated, and the waitress comes around and Barry Ferguson orders melon as a starter. And the waitress says, would you like some ginger with your melon? He says, no, Lorenzo's ordered champagne. So it was one of those jokes that just kept getting recycled according to which personnel. Yeah, I think it came from ginger beer or ginger ale, but just that thing whereby everything suddenly becomes ginger.
I always thought it was to do with Iron Brew because of the colour.
No.
But it's like a generic soft drink, isn't it? And I don't know how far west you have to go for it to start getting called ginger, because I lived for many years in Whitburn when I was wee, which is the furthest west that I've. Oh, I was going to say the furthest west that I've lived. But I lived a little spell in Stranraer in my late teens, which I'll not go into because that's a horrible place. But they didn't call it ginger in Whitburn, so it's I don't know. Hart Hill seems to be like the starting point for these things, I think.
What do you call it in the East then? What's the generic term? Just juice.
Aye.
But nobody else calls it that. Like, so you go down. I work with a lot of people in England, and they if you say juice, they're like, they call it pop.
Yeah.
Which is another mad.
Pop was one of those I only ever saw it as a kid. It was always in the Beano, or in comics. The characters referred to pop. And I think, what is that? Because nobody in Scotland referred to it as pop. And ironically, they were all produced from Dundee. All those comics.
Mentally. No, there's no legislating for Dundonians, so I've learned.
I don't imagine they called it pop in Dundee, let's be honest. I think they were just with one eye in their bigger readership.
I work with loads of people for Dundee, so I'm only kidding with that comment just in case anyone is listening and I get grief for it. Next question then comes from Fattest Prickus, who actually he says, surely only Shortbangers can answer this, and it's a question for Ray Forsyth. Have you ever seen a seagull in a tree?
No. I've seen seagulls in so many unlikely places. I remember I was living in Aberdeen, and the centre of Aberdeen was really narrow pavements, and sometimes these big seagulls would come in, and especially on when the bins were coming round, and there was back in the days before you had proper wheelie bins, you just put it in your plastic bag and the seagulls would just tear it to shreds. But I remember walking down the street and the seagull was walking in the other direction, and honestly it was like, no, you get out of the way, you know? And I did, you know?
We got asked if you'd seen a seagull blink before, eh? Was that a couple of weeks ago, Colin? Have you seen a seagull blink? Don't think I've seen that either. Chris, you're St Mirren fan. What is your sort of your highlight as a St Mirren fan?
Obviously, it's weird actually because when I was growing up, it was the 1987 Cup final, but it's that thing whereby when you're older, things mean more to you. So the League Cup win in 2013 actually meant more. And I think it was more impressive in terms of the teams that St Mirren beat over the course of that run. 87 was weird in that they won the Cup, but it felt like it would have meant more if it had been the teams that got to the semi-finals in 82, 83 and 84. They had really good teams that got to the semis in those years and were really unlucky and in some cases horribly robbed by games. Sometimes just bad luck, and sometimes the game against Rangers in 82 is particularly infuriating. But by the time when 87 came around, it felt like, where did that come from? How did that team actually win the Cup? Whereas the 2013 team, the fact that you'd Stephen Thompson coming back, he'd never played for St Mirren before, but he was a childhood St Mirren fan, and Gary Teal as well, you know, so it was this sense of that we had a good team that cared, and they just beat a lot of good teams on the road to it. And I was quite reluctant to go to the semi-final. I was at every game in that cup run from the very earliest one down. I think we were down in Ayr or somewhere in August. But the one game I didn't get to was the away game up in Aberdeen. But I just remember thinking, I don't know if I can face another semi-final humping off of one of the old firm, you know. But I went along anyway, and yeah, they were fantastic that day. There was 3-1 up going into the last seconds of injury time. It was weird seeing Celtic get a goal in injury time and not have to worry that there was going to be an onslaught. And then obviously you guys would have enjoyed the final. It was turned over hearts as well.
John McGinn was playing in the team then as well, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Aye.
Yeah.
So that was the skinhead John McGinn. It was when he had the skinhead.
Meatball Head. I think that's still his Twitter handle. Is Meatball.
He was a cracking player for St Mirren as well. He kind of coming through. And do you still kind of follow his career? Because other Hibs fans follow his career. Has a right affinity with Hibs, but obviously started off at St Mirren. So is he one you keep an eye on?
Oh, of course. I mean, you kind of always have a degree of pride when there's players that you had some kind of emotional investment in their development. And in his case, it actually preceded his, not so much his arrival at the club, but the fact that his older brother had been such a figure at St Mirren. I mean, he was a legend for scoring that absolute worldie against Rangers in early 2000s, must have been about 2006, I think. First time we'd beaten Rangers in I don't know how many years. But he was a great player for St Mirren, and we knew that there was these brothers coming through. But watching John McGinn from a very early age, he was doing some fairly amazing things, you know.
Hearts and Cup finals was one of them.
Definitely. Do you think you get another sell-on fee when he gets sold again? Do you think you get another kickback? We're hoping to keep all this time.
Right, next question comes from Part Fry's Image, and it's following the TLDR reference in Longbangers at the weekend. What's the best acronym you have heard of or used? Fast Action Response Teams, Water Displacement's 40th Formula, GGTTH, and it says Shortbangers questions usually interrupt dinner. So the best acronym that you've heard or used?
It's TLDR.
Too long, didn't read. That one must be a nightmare in offer. Like if you see that, you must go, oh, fuck's sake.
There's one that I always liked, which is used by tech people, where they could use it in front of the client, really, without them knowing what it was. And it was PEBKEC, PEBKEC, and it stands for Problem Exists Between Keyboard and Chair.
Yeah.
He had a few. There was Safe Hearts in Trouble when they were going through their They're terrible times.
Yeah.
That was one that kind of got kicked about.
Yeah.
Bad for remembering stuff like that, eh?
Mark Bellingham and I have got this we do this sort of almost cabaret type show where we read out readers' letters of complaint, and there's a lot of them about swearing, and Mark's got this really bizarre series of letters from some guy talking about the members of his association objecting to the content of his books. We were kind of baffled by what this association was, so on stage we come up with a few acronyms for what it could stand for, and one of them was the Campaign for the Usage of Noble Text.
We would sometimes try to get that down the side of an email. That word, do you know, if you can just get the letters to line up and just make it look accidental at work. Fattest Prickus asks, is a radio just a telly without a screen? Surely not the other way around, isn't it? A telly's a radio with a screen, because radios were out first.
Radio came first, aye. Yeah.
Yeah. Weirdly, in the early days of the BBC, Lord Reith, founder of the BBC, insisted that the newsreaders wear dinner jackets and suits for reading the news, but this was on the radio.
Brilliant.
So it was the level of gravitas he thought it was appropriate. So even though nobody could see them, I think he maybe thought this made them feel the weight of the responsibility.
I think we should start doing it for the podcast call and just start dressing up proper for it.
Only if you switch the cameras off, though.
What's the fun in that? Right. Ian T said Spectrum or Commodore 64.
Spectrum.
Colin, were you ever into that?
Nah, I played them, but I'm never, I've not really, I don't know. I've had a PlayStation 1, that's about it in my lifetime. And I had an Atari thing years ago, my mum and dad got me for my Christmas one. You put the tape in, you had to wait about fucking 30 minutes for a game to load, and you're like, can't be arsed playing by the time it's loaded.
The Spectrum wasn't it a superior computer? The Commodore 64, well, you could argue about their specifications. The Amiga was the far more impressive machine, but the tape thing you're talking about, I mean, it was so frustrating, but you didn't rage quit in those days if it took 15 minutes to load the game. But I remember I was doing I was installing a game for my son years ago. It was one of these Total War sort of massive real-time strategy war games, and he was complaining at how long it was taking to install. So I calculated how long, given the size of the file, how long it would have taken to install on my cassette player from my ZX Spectrum, and the answer was 6 years. I worked out if it was 15 minutes for like 48K file.
That's mental.
You created a computer game, Chris, didn't you? Have you got is that right?
I did, yeah. It was Bedlam. It was a bunch of developers down in Brighton they'd read a few of my books, and specifically Big Boy Did It and Ran Away, and then Pandemonium, because both of those had a lot of game references, and they said, you want to develop a first-person shooter with us? And it just sounded like a great idea. It was a lot of fun. Great experience. Don't think it made any money. Well, it may have made money for somebody, but I never saw any of it. But the game was a lot of fun. We got Kirsty Strain, who from Burniston, and Robert Florence, also from Burniston, to do the voices, and various other people doing the voices, including myself. I did about 4 of the voices. But no, it was a great experience. As I say, even though it wasn't, when it was never going to be competing with the AAA games, because it was a budget of about £600,000, which is chicken feed in that world.
How did you find doing that? Because the book and the game kind of went together, didn't they? Like, how did you find that?
Yeah, they kind of got developed in parallel, because I came up with an idea. Having talked to these guys about how we'd all grown up with video games, and we'd seen how they evolved, and also how their role in our lives had changed. And I thought I want to come up with an idea that deals with that. So, and this concept of a kind of interlinked world of games where you could escape from one game into another in a different genre. And in order to develop it properly, I thought, I'll just write this as a book, because it started sounding like a good idea for a book. So I wrote the book while they were trying to get finance for the game. But by the time the book came out in about a year or so, and that really helped them get finance for the game. And after that, it was just a question of taking the same concept and making it work as a game. And a lot of the things remained the same, but some things, clearly it was, given the budget, there was the flights of fancy you can have. You get no budgetary constraints when you're writing a novel. That's the great freedom of it. But it's a lot of fun to write all the script. You don't realise the stuff that needs to be scripted. It's like somebody gets hit and goes, ooh-yeah. You've got to have multiple ooh-yas for characters to react.
But you said about the Spectrum, do you have a favourite game?
Several, I think. When I was growing up, games like, obviously, Jet Set Willy was one of my favourites, and Ant Attack, because you could actually just explore. It was, what they managed to do with the most limited graphics was remarkable. And Trans Am, there was a speed bike game that was a bit like the bike chase in I think it was 3D Death Chase it was called. It was like the scene in Return of the Jedi through the Forest of Endor. It was kind of based on that, but it was obviously it wasn't too close to that, so they didn't get sued. But I lost countless hours, and of course there was a few sort of football management games that I lost countless hours to as well. Do
you still play?
Not much these days. My son plays a lot of games, although he ended up playing a lot of retro stuff because of the stuff that I didn't introduce him to. But no, I've not really played. When first lockdown happened, I went back and kind of revisited some games. But I'm just always busy writing. And also I picked up the guitar a few years ago, and so I end up, if I've got spare time and I want to relax, that's what I do.
Probably better playing the guitar than video games. I still play. I've got to play Xbox, and I sometimes go. They'll sometimes put retro games up on Xbox. And I think, oh, fuck, I remember playing that when I was wee, and I put it on, and invariably I think they're shit now though. I wonder how. Obviously, different times and things have evolved and everything. But when I was a kid, you could spend just days. Like the hours would fly by playing games, and now you look at them and you just think, how did I?
Well, at that time, you get a buzz just out of the interaction with something and seeing a response on screen, but we're far more sophisticated in what we expect our relationship with the game to involve.
Okay, right, next question we've got is from... I'll try to skip because Ian sent a few in. Oh, man, right. There's a few, but we're meant to have Tam Cowan on a couple of weeks ago, but we're still meant to have Tam Cowan on, and we've got questions in for him, so I bookmarked them all on Twitter, and I'm just like come across a list of questions for Tam Cowan. I'll not ask you those ones. There's fucking tons of them. We're okay, right? So Ian T asked about Ron Gordon. If Ron has Peruvian heritage, why is he not Ronaldo?
I'm not familiar with the personnel here.
So Ron Gordon is the Hibs owner.
Right. No.
But I suppose it would fit for any Peruvian called Ron. I don't know, Ian. You need to ask his mum and dad, I suppose, wouldn't you? The kid why Ian thought we would be the people to answer that question.
No. Wrong audience.
If helium balloons, this is for Guinness 2022, if helium balloons are able to lift an entire house and relocate it from the US to Peru, could this be a greener alternative to conventional aircraft, or would protecting air stewardesses' jobs and their votes prevent asking for a non-subscriber in Sweden?
Is that because we were talking about Up the other week?
Have you ever seen Up, Chris?
Yeah.
Is it true that that's the saddest film ever made?
I don't know. I was not sad, obviously. It's got this very famously emotionally affecting first sort of 15 minutes. Didn't hit me as hard as the first time I saw Inside Out. I was absolutely howling watching that within about.
Yeah, I mentioned that was the one I mentioned when we were talking about Up. That's exactly the one I said as well. That's a good film. That if anybody's not seen it.
There must be other logistical challenges to just try to float houses about by balloons, because the steering in that would be problematic. You couldn't have everybody try to. If you were flitting, you couldn't just have everybody up in their own house and just go right transatlantic or wherever and rely on balloons to get you there. I think the stewardesses and stewards' jobs are probably the least of our worries there, if I'm honest with you.
If I was taking it seriously and being honest with you. Aye.
Jack Gillies asked, who's the best at cancelling flights at the last minute, EasyJet or the Home Office? I think this was kind of sent in at the time of Rwanda. What do you make of stuff like that, Chris? We would kind of, obviously, we're not really a political podcast, but we do kind of have a fair old digs at the Tories, because it's fair to say none of us are particular fans of them. The Rwandan question and stuff like that, when you see that coming in, do you kind of see opportunities there to use that stuff in your work?
It's quite difficult at the moment because there's so much of it. I think one of the things they're doing, which it's a tactic they got from Putin and Steve Bannon, both of their own versions of this. Putin calls it fire hosing and Steve Bannon calls it flooding the zone with shit. And it's like just coming up with so many absurd and offensive things that you're still dealing with the last one, when they've moved on, or you're trying to, and it's just to kind of choke up all the bandwidth of their opponents. So it would be really difficult to try and satirize that stuff, because it keeps moving on. And in a way, engaging with it at all is doing what they want you to do, because it's not supposed to actually. I think the thing with the Rwanda flights, obviously they still will try and deport people, but a huge part of it was just grandstanding and creating some kind of scenario whereby they can stamp their feet and complain about lefty lawyers.
It's a good point about it. The sheer volume of it is like if you had to spit an image today, it'd have to be live action, wouldn't it? They'd almost have to just kind of improvise it on the spot to keep up.
I was reading that the other day. The Private Eye there used to be parody and all that in there, but now it's just all just facts. Whereas, that's what's happened, because there's just so much shit goes on.
Some of the stuff I used to write about when I was doing a sort of more politically minded satire in the earlier books, it's not just that stuff would seem tame compared to the reality now. It's that the resolution of those stories is often you find out the truth and confront them with it, and they have to go. Now they confront them with the truth and like, so fuck.
Don't care. Unembarrassable. That's what Boris got called the other day. I can't remember who it was, but unembarrassable. I think that's probably the right word for it.
Definitely. Hibs Allen said, what's a scene from a movie that always makes you laugh and you don't get tired of seeing? And he does say if it's not the scene from See No Evil, Hear No Evil, then it's the wrong answer. Favourite funny scene?
Pretty much anything from Withnail and I. I think that one can make us laugh every time. Midnight Run as well, just as a two-hander. Robert De Niro and Charles Grodin. That one always makes me laugh. Again and again, and it's so quotable. Just I've got 2 words for you: shut the fuck up. That kind of thing.
What were you called?
Well, do you know? I've just remembered what is one that does have me absolutely helpless every time, and it's not as well known as it should be. There's a film called The Nice Guys, and there's this amazing scene with Ryan Gosling and Russell Crowe, and Ryan Gosling is in a toilet cubicle, trying to protect his dignity and hold a gun on Russell Crowe at the same time. And Ryan Gosling's comic timing in this is just among the best I've ever seen.
I don't know if I've seen that one. It rang a bell when you said the title, but I think when you said who was in it,
it was written and directed by Shane Black, who wrote Lethal Weapon and who wrote The Last Boy Scout and Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. And he's a great writer, and he had a great cast. And for some reason, people just didn't go and see this film. So that's why I like recommending it.
I like there's a fart scene in Blazing Saddles, which never gets old. And for me, it's pretty much anything in Airplane. So, like, we reference Airplane all the time in this podcast. Probably my favourite bit is when these Striker sits down next to the old woman and he's got sweats and everything. She says to me, "You nervous?" He says, "Yeah." She says, "Is this your first time?" He goes, "No, I've been nervous lots of times."
Actually, a favourite scene in Blazing Saddles is the first time the two of them are in the jail cell, and they're kind of bonding, and Gene Wilder says to Cleavon Little, "What do you like to do?" And he says, "Well, I like to screw and I like to play chess." And there's just a beat and he goes, "Let's play chess."
What about you, Colin?
Similar to you, Airplane, Naked Gun as well, but I can't remember scenes. Like, I'm a nightmare for that, and I've not seen millions of films either. I watch films, but not loads, as we've discussed on here in the past. Computer games and films, Chris, that's not my area expertise. But aye, those Naked Gun ones and all that, just for the same reasons you were talking, those silly sort of answer kind things.
Aye. Tony Swanson says, right, name a player and a fan of the Cabbage that you could name a food after that sell at Easter Road. So if we adapt that one for you, Chris, you can go for a St Mirren, current or ex-player that you would name a food after for.
I'm completely speechless on that. Which one would I want to name a food after?
John McGinn's already done, so you can't.
Meatballs, you could have jumped in with that, but
yeah. I don't know. I'm trying to think of some kind of David Van Zanten zucchini crossover thing, like. But I can't imagine you'd sell many sort of courgettes in Paisley, Maybe if they were like deep fried courgettes. Van Zanten zucchinis.
It need to be something steady but unspectacular, for the Van Zanten range. Colin, anybody for the Hibs jumping out other than Meatball?
See, this is one where I need time to think. These are ones I wish I read these questions before I came on, so I could have like a wee thought.
Could have had Joe Tortellini.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, actually, Tortellano apparently literally means little cake.
Does it?
I remember that from my evening news days because I used to work alongside David Hardy, who was the Hibs correspondent back then, and he was when Joe Tortellano was playing, he'd found out that was what the name literally meant in Italian.
What did you do at the evening news, Chris?
What was that?
What did you do at the evening news?
Well, I was a freelance sub-editor, so I used to just my job in the evening news. I'd go in on a Monday and a Friday because those were the days that had kind of a lot of big colour and graphics. And in the early 90s, I was like one of the first people in there that had used Quark Express, which was a Apple Mac desktop publishing program. So they would get me to do all the kind of slightly more fancy and complicated stuff on a Monday for the reports, and on a Friday, partly for the Friday preview, but also all the advanced colour pages for the Pink, the Saturday Night Pink. So all of that stuff I would do on a Friday afternoon. And then for a while I wrote a kind of satirical column in the Pink. From the point of view of an alien that just arrived in Edinburgh. So it was a kind of alien's perspective on what was going on in Scottish football. And there was a guy, Paul Burns, his name was. He used to be a cartoonist for one of the Hibs fanzines, and so I got him to do the illustrative cartoon every week for the column.
The Pink News is well missed. They used to get that coming out the football time. You kind of get up to your bus and go back to Milton Roads. You can get a newsagent and get a pink for the wee walk up the road.
Yeah.
David,
explaining the concept of it to younger fans would be baffling. The idea that's how you found out what the scores were at other grounds.
Or what the scores were at 80 minutes. Aye. David Hardy's, I don't know if he still listens, but sometimes contributes to the podcast as well. So hopefully, David, if you're listening, you've enjoyed this one. That's us out of time for this episode. Chris, thanks very much for coming on. You'll be staying for another wee quick episodes for our subscribers, and if you want to hear more from Chris and ourselves, go to https:// longbangers.hubwave.net, and you can sign up there. It's only £3, less than the price of a pint. Right, thanks very much for listening. We'll see you next time.
Well, they trailed me down when I broke free. I drank all the whiskey in Tennessee. I don't drink water, no.